Which diet plan can prevent hunger and increase the ability to lower your A1C, control blood sugars better, and lose weight? Is it the carbohydrates, protein, fats, or fiber which really matter? The newest of studies, which we will dissect today, uses continuous glucose monitor readings to objectively answer this critical question. If predicting and gaining control of hunger is your top priority, then this is the episode for you. Welcome to the Resilient Diabetic. This is the channel we turn ordinary, struggling diabetics into extraordinary, well-controlled diabetics. If you are brand new to this channel, I welcome you. My name is Sampat. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that gray notification bell. That way you will be alerted when new life-changing episodes have been published. And if you have learned something new today, please smash that like button for me. As with all my videos, this should not be considered personal medical advice. This is my interpretation of the latest research. If you want medical advice, please always consult your physician. As diabetics, whether one is a late onset insulin-dependent type 1 like myself or a type 2 diabetic, our number one enemy sabotaging all efforts at controlling our blood sugars and losing weight is, drumroll please, hunger. Everything we've been taught when it comes to dieting will eventually work against us. You've heard this all before. You've got to eat less, but that makes us hungry. You've got to exercise more, but that makes one even hungrier. Well, friends, today we will be one step closer to the truth. As mentioned in the episode, the most powerful weight loss tool, which, if you have not seen the episode, I will link it in the description box below. You're probably thinking the most powerful tool for fat loss is some kind of cardio machine like a treadmill or an elliptical trainer. No, not even close. It is a tool we as diabetics use on a daily basis to measure our blood sugars, the glucose meter. But in today's world, it is the new continuous glucose monitors or CGMs, which I do use, and its value is in much more than just measuring our blood sugars. This tool is the single most important weapon we have towards not only weight loss, but increasing our quality of life. This piece of technology has a dual role akin to the fountain of youth, as you will find out why. So let's get back to weight loss. Weight loss happens between meals. That is when we have controlled, flatline blood sugars, and most importantly, no excessive insulin floating around. So understanding how your blood sugars responds to food is a great way to facilitate long-term healthy fat loss. If you are following a specific diet, but your results have not only plateaued, but you're frustrated beyond measure, then I want you to listen up, because I will be giving you the goose that lays that golden egg. That glucose meter can not only help you see your blood sugars in a specific point in time, but more importantly, help you identify foods or the combination of macronutrients in that food that raises blood glucose, thus insulin requirements, and even lifestyle factors that cause your blood sugars to spike, and as a result, will hinder fat loss. As blood sugars spike, so does insulin, and too much insulin inhibits fat loss. Remember, insulin role as the master hormone is to store, to hoard, and to lock in nutrients. When insulin and blood sugars are high, we are incapable of burning fats for energy. And here's the irony. We as humans are designed to be fat-burning machines. How much fat does the average adult male have in body stores? Enough to walk from Miami to New York nonstop. There is a secondary impact to unstable blood sugars that swing up and down. This newest study, which we will cover today, shows it is the dips below baseline, not the rise in blood sugars, that will predict not only how hungry you will be, but how soon you will eat and how much. This recent study, published in April of this year by Nature Metabolism, looked at the responses to food in real life settings. The research team collected detailed data about blood sugar responses and other markers of health from over 1,000 participants after eating 5 different standardized breakfasts. And then this is critical. They were allowed to freely eat any chosen meal or meals of their choice over a 2-week period after that breakfast. The standardized breakfasts were high in carbs and based on muffins containing the same amount of calories, but they varied in composition in terms of carbohydrates, protein, fat, and fiber. Participants wore a continuous glucose monitor to measure their blood sugar levels over the entire duration of the study, as well as wearable devices to monitor activity and sleep. They also recorded levels of hunger and alertness, along with a log with exactly when and what they ate over the day. All previous studies looking at blood sugars after eating have focused on the way that the levels rise and fall in the first 2 hours after a meal, looking specifically for that blood sugar peak. However, after analyzing the data, the study noted that some experience a significant blood glucose dip 2 to 4 hours after this initial peak. The study called these participants Big Dippers. These Big Dippers had a 9% increase in hunger, and they ate their next meal half an hour earlier than the Little Dippers, even though they may have eaten the exact same meals. These Big Dippers, they also ate 75 more calories in the 3 to 4 hours after breakfast, and around 312 calories more over the whole day than the Little Dippers. This kind of pattern could easily turn into a 10 to 25 pound weight gain over a year. The CGMs, the continuous glucose monitors, showed that blood glucose dips are better indicators of hunger and subsequent calorie intake than the initial blood sugar peak response after eating. What changes now after this study? Nutritionalists have to think about how to prevent blood sugar dips through the best combination of foods we eat. That is, how much carbohydrates, protein, fats are in each meal, and most importantly, the ratio of each. But unfortunately, we do have to address the elephant in the room. One has to remember the bias in our governing health institutional system. All of our organizations have a pro-carbohydrate, anti-protein, anti-fat agenda. They will limit, they will evade, they will even hide the onslaught of data now going against them. Let's get into the details of the study, and in particular, what I did not like. First, the standard breakfasts that were given were based on muffins containing an equal number of calories, around 500, but they varied in composition of carbs, protein, fat, and fiber. The 1,000 plus participants in the study had no diabetes, insulin resistance, or presumably no metabolic diseases. So in the real world, those with diabetes, especially insulin resistance diabetics, will have severe consequences with the extreme amounts of carbs in those breakfasts. The participants were given one of 5 standard breakfasts, And then they were instructed to fast for 3 hours after breakfast. The rest of the day, it was completely up to them as to what they would eat and, most importantly, how much they would eat. So in other words, it was that breakfast that would set them up for either success or failure based on the ratio of macronutrients in that breakfast. What did they measure? First, how long was the time between breakfast and that next meal? How hungry were they? How much food was eaten on that next meal? And how alert did one feel? Certain meals, as we know, will make you feel sleepy and drowsy, and that is definitely not what we want. As mentioned, those with the largest glucose dips at 2 to 3 hours consumed not only 312 more calories, but ate 25 minutes earlier on their next meal. The big question, what did those 4 standard breakfasts consist of? Each had a total of around 500 calories as mentioned. There was the high carb breakfast with around 95 grams of carbs, a high fat breakfast with around 40 grams of fats and around 30 grams of carbs, a high fiber version with around 17 grams of fiber, but still had considerable grams of carbs, 95. And finally, a high protein breakfast with around 41 grams of protein, but still with 70 grams of carbs. And what were the results? The high protein group had not only the lowest blood glucose rise, but most importantly, the lowest dip at 2 to 3 hours. They ate a total of 2,231 calories for the rest of the day, and they scored well on the alertness scale. The high fat muffin group, which also consisted of around 30-gram intake of carbs, had the second lowest rise in blood sugars. And that should not be surprising because remember, fats slow down the absorption of glucose. But here was the big surprise. They had the worst dips at the 2 to 3 hour point. This group ate the most food on the next freely chosen meal after breakfast. And I bet if they measured blood insulin levels in this group, it would have been chronic and through the roof. And that is why you would see the biggest dip 2 to 3 hours later. The high carb arm had the highest glucose peak, but a moderate dip. They scored poorly on the hunger scale. Obviously, this meal eaten on a daily basis would eventually produce the worst A1C test results. Ultimately, the two winners were the high protein and the high fiber breakfast groups, even though they contained excessive amounts of carbs. And I do want to point out, this was definitely not a low carb study. If it was, and they had another group who say ate 2 eggs instead of that muffin, and the carbs were lower, there would have been even a greater discrepancy in the results. But because of today's bias, they would never intentionally sabotage their own study. As we already know, blood sugar lines would have been even straighter with little to no dip. Hunger scores would have been exceptional, along with how alert everyone felt. Why did the high protein group fare the best? Simple. We always have to look to our genes. In the episode, The Most Important Nutrient for Diabetics, which I will also happily put in the description box below for you, I explained dieters who restrict calories and protein throughout the day will feel hungry and deprived. And this is natural. It's based on our biological history and our hardwired genetics. That is why someone would find themselves diving headfirst into a gallon of ice cream late at night, or they try to fill up on foods that ultimately offer very little satiety, like lettuce, rice cakes, granola bars, carrot sticks, even fat bombs to no avail. This will eventually lead to failure, consequently beating yourself up for seemingly out of control junk food cravings, which again is not your fault. This study helped reinforce what is known as the protein leverage hypothesis, This predicts we humans will always prioritize protein first when regulating total food intake. In plain English, we are continually driven to consume more and more food until we meet our minimum protein or amino acid needs for the day. The real world implication is that if we don't consume adequate protein, we will overconsume other foods high in carbohydrates and or fats in a subconscious effort to obtain those critical missing amino acids. That is why it is so easy to polish off a bag of potato chips or cookies in one sitting. But if we had a steak, eggs, or even a pork chop, we don't want anything more. So to prevent hunger, your diet starts and ends with protein first, and then everything else is built around that. The end result to prioritizing lean protein sources along with the right mix of low carb, high fiber vegetables, because remember, the high fiber group in that study also did well, will be blood sugars that are not only well controlled and low, but body that will require very little insulin, which means low inflammatory levels. Hunger levels will dramatically drop and one will become more alert and energetic. Body fat will continue to melt off. Muscle mass will continue to be retained or even built, especially if weight training is concurrently executed. But most importantly for you, you get your life back, refocused on other missions in life outside of obsessing over being diabetic and the consequences of food. I bet you would love to learn more on the subject, so I'll create 2 links for you. The first link you will see will be to subscribe to this all-important life-changing channel. The second will be a link to the playlist on diabetic weight and fat loss episodes. So have a great and productive day, and we will see you soon with another new episode, which are generally released weekly. Bye for now.